Okay, here's to the wild dreamers who decided to start something, a nonprofit, a business, whatever. Well, our speaker is a partner at two Bay Area startup accelerators, Silicon Valley in Your Pocket, which is a global virtual program, and Battery, a Berkeley-based startup accelerator, where he served as CEO and managing partner during launch and scaling. He's an international keynote speaker, a startup coach, and has worked with entrepreneurs at global incubators and accelerators across Europe, Asia, and Latin America. He has also served on the screening, diligence, and pitch event committees for the Berkeley Angel Network and Angel Investment Group for UC Berkeley alumni. With a background in finance, strategy, and product management, our speaker has held a number of executive positions at companies ranging from Fortune 100 companies to early stage startup companies, including Visa, Wells Fargo, and Pricewaterhouse. He holds an MBA from UC Berkeley's Haas School of Business and a bachelor's degree in management science from UC San Diego. Important. He wrote and directed a Sundance Film Festival nominated mockumentary about a short film about a fictional startup company called Iceband.com. He spent time in San Quentin prison to produce a documentary
Okay.
on the university program for inmates and amateur cocktail mixologist. So keep that in mind, mixologist, and has created an annual craft cocktail competition called Art of Mixology. So let's have an accelerated welcome for Cal Deutsch.
Thank you. Let me figure out where my deck is. And I have to screen share. Okay. There we go. Yeah, thank you so much, buddy, for inviting me. Blown away that you have invited people from around the world to come and talk here. And here I literally live one freeway exit away, which is so easy. People were wondering, like, why would you not just zoom in? I'm like, I have no excuse. I'm so yeah, you know, there's my clicker working. There we go. So Buddy did a wonderful intro, gave a little bit about my background. You know. A little bit better. Okay. Oh no, I guess that's on somebody else's screen. Is there any way that? Not sure.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'll try and get rid of it.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Okay.
Just keep going.
So on the right side, Buddy already talked about the places that I've worked. In terms of places where I've gotten the distinct pleasure of working with startups, the logos on the right are just some examples. He had mentioned Battery, which is based in Berkeley. We are now, it's about 7 years old. We are on batch 17. We graduated over 200 companies. Silicon Valley in Your Pocket. Between the two, I've probably gotten to work with my partner on maybe 1,700 companies over the last 7 years or so. Just some samples from around the world. Kotra is a government agency for the South Korea, where they're working to bring companies to Silicon Valley, so we got them ready for a demo day. Let's see what else. Cyberport is actually from several of my UC Berkeley colleagues. We get to, or got to fly to Hong Kong twice a year and work with about 50 startups at a time. We did that about 5 years running until politics got in the way, and now we're not doing that anymore. But I know politics are known, so we won't go there. And then lastly, you know, I got to know Buddy through UC Berkeley. We took our program at Silicon Valley in Your Pocket and then partnered with UC Berkeley to translate it into Spanish. And now there are people that were speaking Spanish doing our program, so that was kind of fun as well. Anyway, it has been just an absolute thrill to be working with young, old, everything in between entrepreneurs that are really changing our 21st century. And if I do this till the day I die, I'm just thrilled. So our company, Silicon Valley in Your Pocket, here's a very quick summary of the things that we do. We run accelerator programs around the world. We help companies come into the United States. We do all kinds of boot camps, workshops, full-blown acceleration programs. And then we are also working on a venture studio model, ultimately to make startups less risky. And that's one of the things that I thought I'd share with you today, because this is really important as you think about how venture capital needs to evolve in the coming years. I also wanted to caveat, I might throw out technical jargon. I love interactive. You can raise your hand, and if something doesn't make sense, feel free to just chime up, and we can make this a good conversation. So, first of all, I'm assuming everybody has heard of unicorns. Raise your hand. That's just my show of hands. Have you heard of unicorns? So it's the thing that's like the billion-dollar company, and we have lived, for those of us that have lived in the Bay Area, through an amazing time. Some of the logos you see here, you probably know very well. Apple is on here. They were founded in 1976. They became a billion-dollar company, I think, in 1980. Then, Google came in the 90s, and Facebook came, and just the last couple of years. There's more and more unicorns happening more quickly. Fun. But there's a little bit of a reality check that we have to take with the whole unicorn thing. And that is, just the harsh reality of, like, well, what's the starting point? How many startups are out there? And so I like to be lazy, but I like to be somewhat informed. So my lazy way of doing market research is just to go to Google. Hey, Google, how many startups are out there? Well, in the United States, it's about a little over 72,000 startups. And of course, the number is way, way bigger if you think about it globally. So then I could do the follow-up research with Google. How many unicorns are out there? And the official number for the grand total of the running count of unicorns is 639. So if you do the quick unofficial math of like, well, what are the odds of my nephew's startup turning into a unicorn? Well, the lazy man could just say 639 divided by the 72,000. It turns out to be about 0.88%. So less than 1 out of 100 startups actually turn into unicorns. And that is a really important consideration, because then we can start to benchmark it against, well, how many other things have a 1 out of 100 chance? And now this is where I always caveat, I like to cite my sources. And I will call this sloppy internet research, but using ChatGPT. Who's heard of ChatGPT? Who has played with ChatGPT? Okay, we can talk later. Scary, scary stuff. Yeah. But so these are really, according to the internet, the things that have a 1 in 100 chance. And we can even test our head. How many of you have had a hole in one? Okay.
Right through the windmill.
Does miniature golf count?
You're having better odd on that one. The one that kind of blew me away here is the person showering less than we do. And I ran this back by a colleague of mine yesterday. And he said, yeah, that sounds like my wife. I'm like, oh. Okay. So startups are somewhere around, between hole in one and showering less than once a week. So how do we make it less risky and have more upside overall? First of all, let me ask, any venture capitalists in the room before I start to pick on them a little bit? One of the ways that VCs measure themselves is on exit multiples. So it's not like, going to the bank and getting, 5% of your money. You have to get a multiple. If you invest $1, you want to have a 10x, you want to have that dollar turn into $10. And this is the real sort of aggregate average of the returns that VCs experience. 50% of their portfolio, 50% of their startups return less than 1x. So they put $1 into a company and they get less than $1 back. That's not good. A little over a third will return 1 to 2x. Now we get into the whole thing about time, because the average portfolio duration could be 8 to 10 years. And if you only get a 2x and it took 10 years to get it, even that's not very good. So we're up to 85% of your portfolio. So long story short is you only have about 5% of their portfolio that even returns a 3x. So they triple their money. And so there's underneath this kind of like this very big elephant in the room. And that is that in most portfolios, most investments, they will have roughly, on a good day, a 90% failure rate. So at our company, we've spent the last several years really just becoming a student of this problem. Why is there a 90% failure rate? And more importantly, what can we do? So I also come with this approach and belief that every company will eventually succumb to the laws of financial physics. And I think my belief there is really a product of where I came from. I started at an accounting firm, Price Waterhouse. I worked at a very conservative, traditional bank, Wells Fargo. And I went to business school. And I did not learn about unicorns then. I learned about PE ratios, price earning ratios, things like that, exit multiples, the multiple of revenues that you might get when you sell your company. And those are what I call traditional financial physics. So no matter how frothy things get, because we're all super excited about Tesla or SpaceX or this or that, eventually, most companies, if your name is not Musk, will have to succumb to those laws of financial physics. That if you IPO, then the stock market's going to value you based on revenues and income and things like that. And similarly, depending on the industry and when you get acquired, the acquiring company would use those laws of financial physics. So we really wanted to know, how do we apply those traditional laws of financial physics to the early stage companies and put them more on a trajectory that are realistic and consistent with sort of real world finance? I know I just dumped a lot at you, so again, raise your hands if any of this doesn't make sense. Another really, really interesting data point came from a group, the Angel Capital Association. It's a trade association for all angel groups. And they actually have an educational arm. And they worked with the Kaufman Foundation and a professor out of Willamette University on the historical performance of angel investor returns and what you can do to produce better returns. And two just glaring facts came out. If you do more due diligence, which is just the research of your company that you're potentially investing in, spend time actually studying, checking references, looking at financials, things like that, 40 hours worth of that homework. And then also after you do that and invest, you spend more time with your portfolio companies to the tune of twice a month, as opposed to twice a year. That alone, those two things affected a 5x increase, over 5x. So the exit multiple went from 1.1 to 5.9. And that is one of those Northern Light things for us that we said, how do we systematize that and turn it into a tool that we can be better with early stage companies and treat them very analytically? So, yeah, go ahead.
You cited a reference that you believe 72,500 startups. What is a startup? Is a startup something that someone else invests in, or is it mom and pop small business?
Yeah, so I'll give you my definition. And again,
Could you repeat the question for the?
oh, yeah. So the question is, what is a startup? So, there's a number that somebody cited, 72,000. To me, a startup is something that could be on a venture capital track. And the important thing that determines that is that they're creating a product or service which is scalable and repeatable. If you have a formula And then if you threw more money at it, it can grow into something even bigger. A service business is typically not, because you have to scale with employees and things like that. Retail store is not. So it's something that has great scalability potential. So hopefully that helps. Yeah. So anyway, now we've identified that, systematized due diligence and then systematized as well, ongoing regular engagement with the startups and give them resources to course correct in case they're making mistakes. Now, another northern light for us is why startups fail. And this is a very well-known CB Insight study that they do year over year over year. And it's an eye chart, and there's a lot of stuff there. So I don't know if you can read this. No market need, ran out of cash, not the right team, got outcompeted. A lot of stuff here. Some of these are underlying symptoms, and some of them are really the root causes. The ran out of cash is really a symptom, but it's not really telling us about the root problem. So we isolated in this analysis the things that are really drivers of problems and try to categorize them. And guess what? It's a lot simpler than this. Team and product market fit are 80% of startup failures, and then everything else is 20%. So we built tools around team and product market fit. And if we can improve those, we stand a much better chance of improving investors' returns and startup success. Okay, so now we talked about systematizing due diligence and having regular ongoing engagement with the company. Now, team, we had to figure out how do we do better team assessments to assess the quality and validity of the team. We had to have tools with product market fit. And guess what? In a lot of these things, as you'll see in a minute, we didn't have to reinvent the wheel. Stuff was already out there. There were some really, really smart people, academics at UC Berkeley and that other college down the road.
You don't let him.
Is it fair? Okay, good.
Yes.
And so we're leveraging those, but then sort of systematizing the analytics on it. And then lastly, it's something we call a traction playbook. We know that the things that are important to investors, and it's really conveying it to the founders, that a lot of kids we meet, there's actually an expression called MVP. Everybody's talking about MVP. I know nobody knows it. Minimum viable product. And so what that means is that a lot of kids think, oh, well, all I need to do is hack together something and say, hey, I have a product. And, it's held together with bubble gum and baling wire. No, investors don't invest in products. They invest in companies. So companies need to show traction, which is then business development. It's all the important things that really show market validation. So we bake those into a traction playbook. This is where it gets fun. This is a little bit of an eye chart. Some people have a little trouble contextualizing to the what I call a spider chart, but it basically is sort of a graph on 7 different dimensions. And again, we didn't invent this. We took research that's out there about what the successful entrepreneur's mindset is. So Buddy and I do things at UC Berkeley at the Satarja Center for Entrepreneurs and Technology, and they're big into the growth mindset. You see down there. I'll quickly go through these things. Perseverance, there's something called the grit scale. Doing a startup is hard. The typical time to exit a startup is at least 8 years. And so you need to have perseverance. You need to have grit because you're going to be in this for 8 years plus, potentially. High EQ, emotional intelligence, just being able to emotionally connect with people to resolve problems and conflict, absolutely key. Visionary pragmatism. Again, we didn't invent this. There are studies out there. This is now the balance between being a dreamer and being a pragmatist that can actually make things happen. And one of the things we do find is that some people are dreamers. I'm a little bit skewed towards the visionary dreamer side. And That's okay, but then you need people around you that can sort of, when the rubber meets the road, get things done. So just understanding where you are in that is absolutely key. Growth mindset is actually the mindset that whatever I'm doing, I can get better. I can be taught by other people. This one really resonates with me because at UC Berkeley, there's this, you know, for the business school, there's a set of values, and one of the values is students always. And I genuinely believe that, and it just means that you're willing to grow and get better, and you think you can. So we do even exercises with folks about singing, and a lot of people say, "Oh, I cannot get any better at singing." Well, my wife and I over the summer took singing lessons. I got a little bit better, and I think I can still get better. And you know, it's a growth mindset. Self-confidence is critical because you're going to be in a lot of adverse situations. You're going to have to be able to sell, and if you don't have that to lead your company, that's a big issue. Influencer is again related to the salesman skills, and then diversity. So a lot of people think that diversity is like, you know, it's the right thing to do because, you know, it's a social impact thing. Diversity has actually been shown to improve performance of companies. So companies that have women on the board, women in leadership, have better returns on investment. So it's the right thing to do, but it's also the fiscally prudent thing to do for the company. And then it's not just diversity as you know, the social impact side might say. It's actually diversity in backgrounds. And we do need companies. We just finished one program, a sciences company, and a brilliant PhD surrounded himself with 5 more brilliant PhDs. They all talk to each other wonderfully about, you know, genetic sequencing and things like that. But I didn't see any sales or business development or operations people. That's also an important part of diversity. So we kind of made a little box for what the outer parameters should be, that we need to find people that kind of push out on that. And again, it's somebody else's study. And then we map, yeah.
You mentioned women on board. What did you quantify as being the key characteristics that a woman brings to the board?
Honestly, it's a perspective that, how do we put this? It's less of a group think, that if you have one strong person, you're less likely to have yes men. Like, that's why it's an expression, yes men. If you don't hear about yes people, I guess you might. But it's just the willingness to challenge ideas. And it's not, you know, challenging authority. It's actually challenging ideas begets better ideas. And I think that's a really, really important thing. Did that answer the question? Yeah, good. So anyway, we have surveys and we quiz teams, and then we overlay, you know, sort of the optimal minimum range. And this is the current actual for one of the teams that we have. And you can see the areas of growth that we needed to develop for perseverance, you know, teach them, okay, this is a long slog, get ready for it. You know, they weren't strong influencers. Sometimes you can develop those skills. Sometimes you can hire those skills in. The good thing is with this team is that you can see growth mindset. They way exceeded the minimum threshold, which again, having a growth mindset means you're more likely to develop into those other areas as well. Any questions on it? Yeah.
Quantify growth mindset and what defines an influencer.
Yeah. So influencer is not the, you know, TikTok influencer where you're talking about, you know, cosmetics or something. Influencer is really a measure of how persuasive you are in arguments and conversations. Again, there's sort of an optimal range because you do not want somebody that bullies people into submission. So again, it's a delicate juggling act. Does that make sense? Yeah.
The growth mindset, how would you quantify?
Oh, so growth mindset is, we didn't develop this. This is somebody else's 15-question quiz that you answer the quiz. And if I thought of it, I could have actually done a group exercise. You could have done your mobile thing. You could have gotten your growth mindset. It's 15 questions, and then you kind of get an answer from that. Yeah.
Sticking with the growth mindset, so many entrepreneurs want to make billions. What
Brian?
percentage?
Brian, hold on, repeat all that.
Okay, sure. In my experience, so many, particularly young kids, they all want to become billionaires. How percentage of your clientele don't want to make just money? They want to build something and keep it and build it as a contribution to society.
Yeah.
What percentage of that versus the percentage that, oh, I just want to make, I want to sell it
Yeah.
and make a lot of money?
Excellent question. I'm probably not equipped to give the exact right number because it depends on the audience that you keep. The wonderful thing, and Buddy, maybe you can bear this out.
Yeah.
Working with kids at UC Berkeley, I think it's at least 30 or 40%, if not more, that are already thinking about social impact. It's just the environment that we live in here. We have vehicles now. There's something called a B Corp, for example, a benefit corporation. A friend is actually on the board of one of the entities that basically sign up from the get-go for a for-profit model, as well as signing up for some sort of social impact. So the United Nations has come up with something called the SDGs, the Strategic Development Goals. And I see so many kids that just pick out their SDGs that they're trying to resolve. And I mean, that's the thing that gives me great encouragement for the future generation. Yeah.
David Wall has a question. He's online. David?
Hi, thank you for your presentation. So these are great mindsets, if you would, as you have there, but I don't see anything on here about product or domain knowledge. How does that equate into the overall success of a team? People coming, or am I, there we go, am I ahead of the game here?
Yeah. I owe you $1 per segment.
The segue. Mr. Segue, they call it.
So Brian, did I answer your question? I just want to,
Yes.
So then the other part is product market fit and just making sure that the team is working in the right direction for the business as a whole. So here are some really, really important things that we do. And again, the 9 categories that you see here, I'll quickly read through them. Are they solving a problem that needs solving? So they have a good solution, and there's something called value proposition, that people see value in solving that problem. And there are ways we can measure it. Absolutely key. What is their secret sauce, and what is their competitive advantage over time that's going to be an unfair advantage that will basically propel them and challenge them to always seek out that advantage? How big is the market, and how do they enter the market? What's their business model? How do they monetize the customer? Again, team is on here. The financials and KPIs just have to be on there because they've got to do the math. Traction now is the measurement of a predetermined set of goals and how effectively are you moving towards those goals. You're asking, so basically, what are you asking from your investors? And then instead of just saying, how you're going to spend the money, tell us what your milestones are. What will you accomplish with this money? And it's surprising how you can very often stump a founder when you ask them to really sign up for milestones in the future. I even have on here something called exit. Think about your exit. The investor in a venture situation will not make money until you either get acquired or you IPO. And the fact is, in a given year, you might have 100-ish IPOs. So when a 21-year-old says, "Yes, we're going to IPO," I'm going to ask, "Have you ever done it before?" Well, are you going to be the one of the 100 IPOs in the United States this year? No, the more likely thing, if the investor gets their money back, is you get acquired by another company like Google or Facebook or whoever. And then we also looked at overall presentation, which gets into the executive leadership. So what we do with those measures is we first start with the founder and say, we want you to assess yourself. So you can probably see that there's a little area where there should be a name, but it's all pixelated. And that's because we pixelated it to keep the guilty anonymous. So this company self-assessed themselves and gave themselves a 77%, not bad. Now, a consensus of Silicon Valley investors had a more rigorous way of evaluating, and they scored it at 25%. So what we have here is a cognitive dissonance between self-perception of the founder versus a consensus of investors. So you have to shrink that gap. And there's two ways to do it. Either you find investors that sort of are in the cognitive dissonance bubble, or you move the founder back into reality. And so we chose the latter.
That's a hard.
And then we also systematize the process that you can only see comment section 1 here with 2 little blurbs. We auto-generate something like at least 3 comments for each of those 9 sections, and then give them resources to get better. And this is really important because it's an iterative process that we've systematized feedback and resources to get better. And so the goal is over time that you shrink the perception gap, and they start working consistently early on in a direction that's desired by the investors that want them to get better. Any questions on this? Yeah.
Hold up, Mark. Hold on just a second. For those of you who are guests, you have to do the microphone or else the people on Zoom can't hear anything.
I realize we're only seeing second one, but I find a lot of people in talking about startups and growth companies focus a lot about what pain are you solving.
Yeah.
I always like to equate it to, are you a vitamin or painkiller?
Yeah.
How much do you find that you are spending time with people that are trying to create an opportunity as opposed to solving a problem?
It's very common, very, very common. Very often people develop a solution and then try to find a problem to match that solution.
Yeah, it's a problem that doesn't exist.
Exactly. So you touched on the pain. So that's other vernacular that we use. There are pains, and then there's something called gains. And so there's a whole framework to start with the human-centered design of the experience of the job to be done, what they're trying to accomplish. So we teach stuff literally about cleaning, the pains of cleaning the house. And so ultimately in that example, the vacuum cleaner is a pain reliever. And so just having those exercises are absolutely critical just to make sure that we're getting real world problems. And that's just solving even a problem that exists, but there's no value to it. There's no way to monetize it. And that's where, especially when you're talking social impact, you talk about this is the weird convergence of sort of social impact and capitalism, that you can find problems, and if you're a free market person, you have to find a way to align the free market to problems that need solving. I don't know if that makes sense. And so that was my last example. I think I'm probably already over time. If I am not getting kicked off the floor, I'm happy to take more questions. Otherwise,
Any other questions for Cal? One more.
Apologize, Kel, this is a big one and it's not just about your thing, but I'm not a business person and I don't understand how companies are valued before they go to an IPO. Because you see these, I know that's a huge question, but if you could just give me the broad strokes, I'd appreciate it because the numbers are just astronomical and on what basis? It just seems so intangible. What are those values derived from?
Yeah, so we actually are using an AI evaluation tool that they use for mergers and acquisitions, like to do some backing on the math to help start us. The brutal truth is there's a lot of this, and there's a bit of a herd mentality as well. They think, okay, so and so is leading this deal. It's like, oh well, if they're doing it, I'm in, and they did it at this price, and it's very, very subjective. Again, I look for the leading indicators of financial viability. So doing a bottoms-up financial model, which is revenue projections, a lot of people say, no, don't do that because they're just BS anyway. Whatever 5-year projections you're going to do are not credible. But if you have financial projections that are tied then to an operating plan, that are tied to a staffing plan, that are tied to marketing plans, there are what I would call like leading indicators that to cobble together can at least tell you whether or not this could fail. And if you start with the assumption that 90% fail, prove to me that this one could succeed. And so I've had arguments with founders that, you know, we're gonna defy the laws of Google advertising physics, I would say. That, you know, I know that like I used to purchase real estate keywords, and I knew what a cost per click or a cost per impression would be for that. And they're saying, oh, no, I'm gonna do something different. I'm gonna buy my leads a lot more. I'm like, oh, no, you can't, because there are teams of PhDs at this company doing the same thing and they cannot do any better. So it's more like using the building blocks of predicting what revenue you might get, what it would cost to run sales campaigns, how to run ad campaigns. And then the company has to sign up for a projection. I'm gonna get to $5 million in year 2, I'm gonna be in 20 million in year 5, and so forth. And then does their supporting evidence bear any evidence that makes you comfortable that they can pull that off? Unfortunately, that's as good as we get. And I'm just not one that believes in, you know, sheer brute force and saying this is going to be a unicorn, so now we have to kind of grow it into that valuation someday. So I don't know if that helps, but
Yeah.
Right. Anyway, thank you.
Cal, thanks.
Obviously, an entrepreneur, like invented this, it's an Ellen fork and it was invented by a Rotarian. We're gonna dedicate one in your name. It gets attached to someone without a hand.
To do that,
And
you'll need to be online.
it helps them, live a more full life. So we're gonna be confident. Thank you so much.
Or how about a picture of you and me holding your hand?
We can do that. Parent, where'd you go? How about?
Cal,